Since you can see my screen, a fun feature for teachers is I can see your responses here. I know there's 35 people in here and that 29, now 30 of you have had enough time to think about that and respond. So this is a good way of making sure that you're giving sufficient wait time for most of your students. So I'm going to go ahead and click responses. And I'll go scrolling through.
Sure. So what we're seeing is experiments and hands-on things like science fair. We're seeing life sciences, so making it about animals and plants, hands-on activities, going to the woods. I wish I had gone to that school. Owl pellets, cool. Lots of notes and little practice.
Sad face.
I relate to that one. Memorizing definitions, labeling. Ooh, being streamed into the bottom set, yeah. Playing, testing out hypotheses, life sciences.
Definitely some sad faces with the textbooks and the not so fun things, the notes and the memorization, and lots of happy memories of meaningful content, especially coupled with experiments.
Right. And I think the reason we tend to remember those experiments is because it really made what we were learning real, whereas the textbooks, it was a book and it wasn't part of our experience yet. So we've got a norm for today, and we've got to ask you to try to be as open-minded and willing to try NGSS as possible. I'm saying this hand on heart. I am an elementary educator. I taught kindergarten, first grade, third grade, and fourth grade. I did not teach these NGSS shifts when I was beginning to teach. In fact, I probably did a lot of like when we show what you should do and shouldn't do, I was a lot in the what we shouldn't do. But once I learned about NGSS and saw the power of it, I started to make those shifts to do it differently for my kids. And so we're asking you to think about the possibility and the potential of making these shifts.
Also, it's important to know that this partnership conference is a lot of unlearning because most of us did not learn in a phenomena-based environment, nor did we attend classes in university or in most professional developments, unless we worked with Paul or some of the few consultants around the world that taught us to teach it that way. So many of us are unlearning what we should not be doing.
And it's not going to happen quickly. I think Britta can say that she's been working at it for years, and schools have been the standards came out in 2013. We're all still learning. And I think that's the power of us coming together. We can learn together and get better together.
Totally. We're not here because our schools are perfect or because we've arrived at NGSS as a destination. We're very much on the journey. So today our learning targets are going to focus around two main things. So the first part is, how is this different than what I'm doing or what I was already doing? And that I can statement is I can identify fundamental shifts in NGSS teaching and learning. The second part is, how do I read this stuff? There's so much edu jargon. The CCCs and the SEPs and the DCIs, that can turn you off right away. So we want to make sure that you can navigate that. There will be a lot of that in the crash course, but that will set you up for the rest of the week. And eventually we want that to help you with the second I can statement, which is I can read NGSS standards to inform unit planning.
We want this session to be as practical as possible. So what we're wanting you to leave with today is a phenomena that you can use in a unit that is upcoming for you in your grade level. And we also want you to leave feeling confident that you could look at a standard and be able to read it and find the information that you need to be able to tackle that unit. So we're looking for a product and a process in this presentation.
Okay, so if you came to our first session, you saw this little slide that has kind of the three main ways that you know if you're doing NGSS. Two that we're going to focus on to start out with are engaging in phenomena or problems to start and sustain their inquiry. And the second one is figuring something out or solving most of the time. The quickest way to know if you're doing NGSS is to ask yourself, do I still explain to my students how something works rather than letting them figure it out? So we're going to try to model with some anchoring and building phenomena today. And then we'll move into this third area in the second part of our session. So phenomena-based learning, you can basically break phenomena into two pieces. The first one is anchor phenomena. This is phenomena that you use at the beginning of a unit. It is something that should hook your students. It should be relatively complex because the inquiry cycle will have smaller pieces they need to uncover over time. However, some students will figure out your anchor phenomena or will have experience with it in the past, and you want to keep things new and you want to sustain the inquiry. So you use investigatory or building phenomena to help them uncover and work with new and smaller bits of information. Something important to remember is that not all phenomena is phenomenal. That is a quote from Paul Anderson. So you can't always find the most engaging, hands-on, incredible, mind-blowing phenomena for every unit, but you can find phenomena that even if it's simple, or I shouldn't say simple, if it's maybe less mind-blowing, that will still keep learning happening and will still show you and your students that there's something to be curious about, that there's something that you may not know yet. Remember in NGSS that content is not directly instructed. So what you're using phenomena for is to get your students to explore how something works in the natural world. So you can support and scaffold what they describe, especially if you have multilingual or bilingual students. They're going to be saying things in their own words, and you can bring in words at the appropriate moment, but you're usually not starting out with anything that you might have done when you were younger. A vocabulary worksheet, a glossary of out of context vocabulary. That's not happening.
I'm feeling really lucky that none of my third grade teachers came to this session because I totally stole their phenomena. So just shout out to ASFM third grade team. So this is a true phenomena that we use to kick off a unit, and it's an anchoring phenomena. So like Britta said, it's something that's complex and that our students shouldn't know about. And I'm going to ask you to be like a student, right? So I know we all have Google right in front of us, but if you could bear with me to just not use your computer, but look at this from a lens of this is a hare that lives in colder regions, sometimes at altitude in the Northern Hemisphere. And you can see that there's some difference, like they're all the same species, but looking at these pictures, you can see some differences between the photos. And what might you be curious about, or what could you wonder about this species of hare? And I can't remember, but can they respond in Pear Deck, or are we asking them to respond in
I
Pear
can
Deck?
see that we have 14 of 36 responses in, so we can definitely give some more wait time so you can be curious and tell us what you're wondering about. This is a very open question, so there's no wrong answer. You will potentially be in sessions with Paul where he helps you fine tune your questions so that they're related to a cross-cutting concept, but we're not there yet. So this is just general wonderings and what's making you feel curious.
And the Right Question Institute out of Harvard talks about how we really need to let people come up with multiple questions, because sometimes the first question isn't the question that they're most curious about, that they need time to come up with multiple questions. So if you've already pressed return, can they input again, Britta? Is that a possibility?
I can't remember, to be honest.
Yes.
Yes, it gives us that option.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Alrighty, so here's some of the responses. Heather, tell me if I'm scrolling through too quickly.
No, you're not. Okay, so something about colors, different colors. Are they endangered? Hair colors. Are they different species, and can they run really fast? How are they different? So we're noticing a trend around colors. Are they making a comeback? So linking back to the endangered. Why are the ears longer? Stay warm, different environments, leaner than others, different habitats. what does the color of the fur say about the, okay, so it's taking that color and bringing it to a different kind of like, is it about the environment or is it about something specific to their habitat? How did they adapt it to live in the cold?
Should I keep going? That's pretty
Yeah.
good. All right.
Body differences. Okay. So I'm going to start to kind of summarize. So it seems like we're really interested in their traits as in colors. We're interested, is that impacted by their habitat, so where they're living? Some people were really interested in other traits like in their ears or about their weight gain, like how much blubber they have on them. Why does one fear? So there's some that have a mixture of fur. So what's going on there? Can you keep going, Britta? Is their hair thick? Does it relate to temperature? So again, something about the habitat, about traits again with their feet. So I'm going to give you a hint. All of this stuff that I'm talking about is already things that I've read about in the standards. So I've pulled out of you information about the standards. And so now I can kind of gauge about how much you know about traits of animals, about habitats, and how the environment can affect those traits. Why are they named snowshoe? So, but this is way too complex of a phenomena, right? Like just based on those pictures, you're not going to be able to get that information, to get the answers that you want. And so now we're going to delve into some building phenomena that are, wouldn't say more simplistic, but easier to pull apart and easier to make sense of.
All right, so we're gonna leave the snowshoe and we're gonna look at butterfly eyes. So looking at this new picture, which this is what we would call a building or an investigatory phenomena. It's a smaller piece that's gonna sustain our inquiry. We haven't given you the answer yet. If you were watching a mystery science video, unfortunately, they already would have spoiled it and told you how everything works. You're going to type into your Pear Deck, is this somehow connected to the snowshoe hare phenomena? So what are your ideas or predictions? How might butterfly eyes be connected to the snowshoe hare? Do you think that those are the same phenomena? Are you seeing the same thing? Are you seeing something different? I'll wait for just a few more responses, and I won't spend quite as long looking at those responses for our building phenomena because we do have a time limit today, but I want to see what you're thinking and I want to see how you might connect one phenomena with the next without any other activities being meaningfully placed between them. Okay, so we see adaptation, camouflage, some more information on traits, colors, and eyes, camouflage. I'll scroll through so y'all can read those too. Definite prediction around this being camouflaging as the phenomena that we're seeing, noticings around traits, and some different curiosity questions. So if I were to do this over the course of several weeks, I would need to keep finding phenomena that sustain your inquiry and continue your questions and your predictions. So if you look at these, you've got 4 more pictures here. Do you think that these are the same pictures as butterfly eyes? Do you think they're the same? Do you think they're different? And I'd love to encourage you now, because we've been doing mostly nonverbal things. If you're feeling like you want to participate after your workday and you're enjoying this phenomena and feeling curious about it, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand and we will call on you. Do you think that these are the same phenomena as butterfly eyes? Take a bit of time to check those out. You think they're different? We'd love to hear from you. We've got 4 different organisms. This one, if it's a little difficult to see, it's actually this part that I'm going over with my arrow. It's a lizard that's in there. And this is the organism here, here, and here. All right, is anyone feeling interested in speaking about why these pictures might be the same or different phenomena?
Well, hi, I'm from ASFM. My name is Pamela. Well, I think they're all related in some ways since it looks like they blend in with their surroundings.
It's a great noticing. Do you think they're the same phenomena as the butterfly eyes that you saw, or do you think they're different?
They might be related.
All right, and guess what? We're not going to tell you the answer yet. So Pamela doesn't have to worry about being wrong because we're not going to say anything yet. So here's another one that you can see. Basically, the main thing that we're wanting to show here is that phenomena is a craft that teachers put together. It does take some time to select all of these. Sometimes it's videos, sometimes it's demonstrations in the classroom, sometimes they're pictures. You're building phenomena, you're building storylines, but what you're doing with phenomena is trying to get students to figure out something that could have just been killed immediately if you told them how it works. So I could have said, hi class, today I'm going to give you a lesson on blah, 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 and I can tell you how it works, but then you wouldn't have to think about it. And guess what? That's not how real science works, and that's not what real scientists do. So if I were to continue deepening this, I might ask, why does one animal end up mimicking another specific animal? So what's going on? And I can just keep that going on. Really, I can sustain your inquiry as long as I find investigatory phenomena. Nikki, I see you have your hand raised. Would you like to give us a guess on same or different, or say something else?
Yeah, I think it really connects a lot with the being adaptive to their environment and surviving in their environment. So regardless of how they change, they all try to blend in. And in the case of the butterflies, on the one hand, it's blending in, but I believe they're also to mimic another animal's eyes, like an owl's eyes, or so that they also predators they're not easily preyed on, right? So I think that in general, the phenomena does have a relationship to adapting to the environment and surviving in their environment, which is what I would say how they're connected.
Great connections and predictions, and you won't see a lecture on how this works, but you will see the standard that Heather and I pulled these phenomena for. So you'll get to see if your predictions connect to that.
So yes, drum roll, please. These are the standards that this phenomena connects to. And so the whole time that our third grade teachers are showing the snowshoe hare to their students, they have a lens on these 2 standards, which are about hereditary traits and traits being affected by the environment. And snowshoe hares show that because I know some people really want to know, it's because it is about a change in temperature that goes on. But the problem with camouflage, and people are wondering if they're endangered, if the temperature changes but it doesn't snow, is there camouflage? So the lessening of snow happening in the Arctic regions is impacting this hare and its chances for survival. So right, we could, like Britta said, we could have done in a lecture the whole time, but instead we really just kind of unpacked that through phenomena and then building phenomena to support the idea around traits, around habitats impacting the traits of animals, and then of course adaptation. So phenomena needs to be connected to standards. We can all, like we said, go find really cool phenomena, but it's not going to lead to student learning unless we're very clear about what the students need to learn. It is a crucial teacher craft to use phenomena, and it's written into the framework. So again, if it's a non-negotiable that we kick off a unit with phenomena and allow students to make sense of it over time. It's intentionally paired, and this is pretty jargony, with Science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. Again, plug. Tomorrow, we're going over the science and engineering practices in depth, so you'll have a lot more time to learn about them then, and the cross-cutting concepts on Thursday. There are resources. If you just Google NGSS standards by numbers and letters, you'll find materials on Pinterest or Mystery Science, and you can buy FOSS kits. The problem is that a lot of times they give away the phenomena pretty early on. So it doesn't give the students any room to make sense of the phenomena. And so what we're advocating is to not say full stop, not to use those, but what we're saying is to be mindful of it, to take out the standard and cross-reference those materials. Sometimes they don't align to the standards. They say they do, but they don't. And also to make sure that the phenomena is front and center and that the students do not get their wonder killed in the first 10 minutes.
You might find things where it says it's aligned to 3LS31, but instead of getting a snowshoe hare phenomena to think about, it just gives you a direct instruction lesson on traits in plants and animals and calls that NGSS alignment. And that's definitely not what it is. And you'll definitely walk away from today's sessions with a deeper understanding of that. So I'm going to put a lot of text on the screen right now, and I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about these shifts. So in that left column, you'll see more of this in classrooms and schools where NGSS shifts have happened, and you'll see less of the right column in those same places. So I'd like you to just start out by kind of reading, skimming over that. Definitely going to give you read time, but I'm also going to ask you to type into the chat, not in your Pear Deck, but in your Zoom chat this time, what's something that sticks out to you? What's something you want to do more of or less of? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of student-centered, wonder, curiosity, interest, lots of words that would show that students are probably enjoying it a lot more while they're learning. I'm gonna leave that up there for just a moment longer. Sorry, I see that someone sent me a direct message in the chat, but it must be very far up because I can no longer see it. Apologies. Okay. And of course, phenomena. So thank you so much for reading that, for thinking about it. NGSS is really something special for the students. It's when you say that science is coming up, it's oh my God, science, it's the excitement that gets even higher. It becomes even more of a thing that you see when you're doing NGSS, because science can still be even kind of fun when it's not NGSS or phenomena based, but it gets much more phenomenal along with the things that you're putting into your lessons when those NGSS shifts are taking place. Okay, so we've come to the end of the first part of the session. Again, this is a crash course and we apologize if it's feeling a bit fast, but can you identify fundamental shifts in NGSS teaching and learning? We know this is exposure, you're not going to be tested on it, but in Pear Deck, you can move your dot. And if you're feeling pretty good about that, there's a thumbs up in green. If you're feeling a little shaky, if you don't feel like you can identify those yet, you can put the thumbs down on the red. No harm, no foul, because this is day one of the conference on the Foundations Day, and we've got resources for you and plenty of things to come up this week. So let's see how everybody's feeling. We're all over the map. That's pretty normal for day one of the conference. Some dots kind of moving around. So a couple reminders. You're here with lots of people that are beginning in their journey. So bring all of your curiosity and interest. We have resources for you. One of them is this resource board that we mentioned in the beginning. There's a specific section on phenomena. So there's the bottom 5 resources are searchable libraries of phenomena. We mentioned that it's a craft, a teacher craft to find and meaningfully put together those phenomena, but many teachers have already done that for you in databases. So sometimes it's just the fun job of searching by standard to find something that you really like or that you think will be intriguing to your students with knowledge about your own classroom. So check out the resource list for information on phenomena. And we're going to jump into a bit more information that's found in the NGSS resources side, but these are also 2 very helpful things. Getting to know the framework for science education. It's kind of dense. It's not something you'd read for joy, probably with your coffee on a Sunday morning, but it is something that you might want to work on in a PLC or in a team meeting. That'll help you understand those.
Britta. I think the framework is poetry, you know. No, I joke around that I'm a constitutional scholar. I'm like, who just reads the Constitution and then argues about stuff? Well, I kind of do that with the framework. And if you become a framework nerd too, trust me, it's amazing. Like you'll just pull out quotes all the time. So we've kind of talked to you about the snazzy jazzy part of NGSS, which is phenomena and making sense and student engagement. But we've also talked about how that making sense needs to be rooted in standards. So now we're going to do the little bit more of the drier reading standards part. But trust me, this is important work. And it's the first toe dip into it. Maybe you've done a couple of toe dips and you know that you might need to come back to this information time and time again. That's okay. We've got the resource board in the chat. And so you'll always have that to come back to. There's lots of resources that help you read the standards, but we're going to do that work together now. Why is it so important to read the standards? Well, we know as elementary teachers working with Common Core, ELA, and math, that the assessments are rooted in the standards. And of course, our report cards, everything is rooted in a common understanding of what meeting proficiency looks like at a grade level. The beauty with NGSS is we've got three ways. It's 3-dimensional, and I'm going to get into that soon.
The 3-dimensional part is what makes sometimes high school physics teachers run away from NGSS in confusion. But if you can't unpack a standard by the end of this lesson, you will be able to unpack our program so that you know what's happening on each day, because you'll know what those crazy NGSS acronyms mean. So in terms of diving into that NGSS jargon, put on your seatbelt. Here we go. If this were your standard on the bottom, you have 3LS32. Your first number, like most standards that you'll find, is going to refer to your grade level. In some cases, you'll find a grade band, K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Those are all lumped together in NGSS for some standards like the engineering and technology design standards. The next letters, LS, refer to the domain. So you'll either find PS, LS, ESS, or ETS. You were there for camera on, camera off activity. Those were the domains that we were giving shout outs to. And if you teach in an integrated units or in an integrated science model, you'll usually see lots of different domains in the same unit. It is possible that you might just have a physical science unit or just a life science unit, but you may see those all mixed together. And then your last 2 numbers are going to refer to the disciplinary core idea. That is the NGSS word for the content. So an LS3 brings us to life science 3, heredity, inheritance, and variation of traits. So those of you that mentioned adaptation, camouflaging, colors, and size of the feet, lots of the things that you mentioned for snowshoe hares, that phenomena was specifically linked to this, this DCI or this content area, knowing that we wanted to pull that out. And then the last thing, the 2, is this specific performance expectation, which is sort of like a benchmark in NGSS, using evidence to support the explanation that traits can be influenced by the environment. So in each performance expectation, you've got your grade, your domain, and your content cluster, which NGSS calls a disciplinary core idea.
So we are 3D standards, which makes us different than ELA and math, which are one-dimensional, right? Like they're about the content. In science, we hold each dimension equally, and the dimensions are the science and engineering practices. So what are the kids doing, right? So initially we talked about, we think about teaching, but what are the kids doing with their learning? Those are the practices, and those are defined for every standard. We will talk about all 8 of those coming shortly. Another part are the cross-cutting concepts, which I said were the forgotten stepchild of NGSS. They are how students think about science. And that's a massive shift in teaching and assessing, right? We not only do we want the students to be able to do something, not only do we want students to show proficiency in content, but we also want them to be showing ways of thinking like a scientist. So we've got core ideas, practices, and concepts. And then, so the performance expectations, which of course is more NGSS jargon, so we don't call them standards. We call them performance expectations because the students will perform something. They will actually do something with their knowledge. To do a true false quiz, that's one-dimensional. So that's only getting at the content. What we have students is in this standard using evidence to support the explanation that traits can be influenced by the environment. And we're going to move forward to break that down even further and identify the 3 dimensions in that standard.
So these are the extended list of the science and engineering practices. The first time that I told one of the teams that I work with that there was no scientific method, they didn't believe me. I think they thought I was a phony coach. But after you do NGSS for a while, what you realize is that when you're engaging in real science learning, the scientific method is extremely rigid. It's really only meant for maybe like specific lab investigations or lab experiments. And it doesn't allow you to flexibly move back and forth in your learning the way that real scientists do. So these are the 8 practices. I'm not going to read them to you, but I am going to ask you to think about them in relation to the standard that we just looked at, and you'll be typing into your Pear Deck again. So NGSS, a big shift is out with rigid use of the scientific method, in with flexible use of skills that you explicitly teach and assess. So if you're looking at this performance expectation that we were using, you can check out that list and you can write the number. Which SEP do you think we are assessing and explicitly teaching there? Notice I did not say explicitly teaching about traits and how the environment influences them, but rather the science and engineering practice. So go ahead and put number 1 through 8 for what you think this one is. Remember, this doesn't show your name, so have no fear. If on your first venture learning about NGSS, you picked the wrong SEP, it's okay. This is a little bit of quick feedback for your information. I'll see what we've got coming in so far. So we've got 3, 4, 1, 7, 6, lots of 6s, 4s, 1s, 3s, 8s. Okay. Still, we have more than half of y'all that haven't turned in your responses yet. So we are big on wait time, but small on actual time for the purpose of our crash course. So I'm going to hide the responses. I saw a mixture of 1s, 3s, 4s, 6s, and 8s. So I'm going to target you and give you some feedback. If you go to the NGSS website, it's pretty glorious. If you scroll over this, it pops the SEP up so that it gives you a bit of information about what you should do. But using evidence to support the explanation tells us that students are going to need to explain something, which is possibly constructing an explanation. And they're going to need to obtain evidence or use evidence to do so. So if you had 6 or 8, I can definitely see why you chose both of those. This particular one is constructing explanations. Is it engaging in an argument from evidence?
It's explanation.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I saw evidence and evidence twice, and even I got confused. So let's see, we've still got 23 of 39 responses in there. I know I killed the wait time, but you'll get to guess one more time on the cross-cutting concepts. And as you can see, I even second guess myself there.
And I think some of what you all did was you saw the interconnection between the practices. You're like, wait, but you need to obtain information to be able to do that. Or you should probably ask questions first, right? Well done. Yes, they're all interconnected. That is 100% true. The thing is, when we come to assessment, we don't want to be assessing the kids on all the practices. That's overkill. So we just do the one. We just do the one practice for the assessment, but of course we're teaching all the practices throughout the year and throughout units. With cross-cutting concepts, there are 7. So 8 practices, 7 concepts. And I'm gonna do a quick hint for elementary folk. We tend to have 3. We have patterns, cause and effect, and systems. Those are the ones that pop up over and over for us. Yes, you'll have a random stability and change for 2nd grade. Of course, 4th grade's got a structure and function. Those tend to nestle under the big 3. So when we get to guessing time, you could probably guess one of the 3 and you're gonna be right. Now, these, of course, are how students are thinking. So we're going to be really explicit with the kids about, like, okay, we're going to be finding patterns. So like looking at the snowshoe hares, looking for patterns in their color, or looking for patterns in the habitat. Cause and effect. So, okay, causal factor, and then what's the effect? And then systems is really how things all interconnect. Paul has beautiful videos on Bozeman video. Just go to YouTube and Google Bozeman Science, and he has a video for each of the concepts. And I swear I watched them over and over just to absorb it. Like, the framework's beautiful, but Paul breaks it down. So much thanks to Paul.
Those are on the resource board in the far right column as well.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to guess, which concept do you think is embedded in the standard?
Heather, I'm gonna wait till we have close to 20 and then I'll show them and scroll through them for you.
Right. Patterns, numbers. Let's see, 1, 2, and 7. 1 and 2 can't decide. System. You know, I can see a lot of truth in why people would pick patterns. Of course, there's patterns in everything we observe in natural science. But when it comes down to it, it's about the environment causing a trait. So it is a cause and effect standard. So again, you might have a student bringing up systems and talking about how all the different parts of the habitat could affect the snowshoe hare or the butterfly eyes. But at the end of the day, they are getting assessed. Like I said, we can't do all the concepts, we can't do all the practices for an assessment, but we will do cause and effect in the assessment. Okay, so NGSS is a framework, but it is not a curriculum. And so we build the curriculum. As we've mentioned, there's resources coming out and there's more resources being added every day. More states are adopting, more units are being written. So it's really up on us to be able to have a critical lens by reading the standards and then finding materials, or in some cases creating materials that match it. So when we're looking for learning experiences to help our students understand the standard, well, it's all about inheritance of traits, and it's all about variation in traits based on the environment. So that would be the critical lens that you would look at learning experiences through.
I also would mention, if you are new to NGSS and you still want to have the content backbone for you to know, even if you're keeping curiosity alive with your students, this is the place that you look. The DCI can teach you the content that you might feel more comfortable with knowing before you guide your students through an inquiry process. So that's always there for you. When you go to the NGSS website, this is what it looks like. So you'll find, let me see if I can get my link to work. I mentioned that as you scroll over performance expectations, it actually tells you, oh, I'm constructing explanations and designing solutions. I am I'm having my students think about cause and effect, and I'm working with inheritance and variation of traits. This site is really, really well made. It can be a bit intimidating, but if you play with it, it will definitely become your friend. So you'll have these 3 boxes, and Paul's wonderful site is also color coded by these. If you use Wonder of Science, which you'll definitely see sometime this week, you've got your science and engineering practices, what you need to explicitly instruct. You've got your cross-cutting concept, which you need to teach students how to think around the area. That's also more direct or explicit instruction. And you've got your disciplinary core idea. What are you going to be doing to get your students engaged in phenomena around that? You've also got something, you've probably seen this red text, that's called the assessment boundary in NGSS. So assessment boundary helps you understand as a teacher, in my grade level, where does assessment end? Because if I just said, oh, you're gonna assess your students on adaptation, that could be anything from something that's happening in kindergarten that's relatively simple to something that needs mathematical modeling by the time you're in high school. So it becomes complex, but the nice thing about these assessment boundaries is that NGSS is making sure you know where you start, where you end, so that it's actually appropriate for your students' developmental level. So you can see here, these are 2 physical science standards. They're both around energy, but in 4th grade, students really only need to know that there's a relationship between speed and energy. They're not mathematically modeling it yet. They don't need to know all of the vocabulary around acceleration and change in that movement. They're also just using evidence to construct, so that probably hints that you're having them do a bit of work in the classroom. But here in middle school, they already know that that's kinetic energy. They also know about the transfer of energy in the larger system. And the skill is now constructing, using, and presenting arguments that support a claim. So both the skills become deeper and the content becomes more complex as you spiral up vertically in NGSS. And these red texts are going to give you hints like, okay, in 4th grade, there's no quantitative measurements. I don't need to have my students measure joules or seconds, but by the time they're in middle school, I do.
So what we're not going to address today is the lack of time in an elementary classroom for science. I know it. I know that you guys are generalists and you have so much to do. So trust me, we're going to be talking to school leaders about that on Thursday. That's our talking session. With you guys, we're going to talk to you about how you can maximize your time. And that's in this box at the bottom of the standards where they've already done a crosswalk. They've told you what ELA and math standards connect to this. So if you're working at a school where you don't have a lot of protected science time, you can always argue that you're doing ELA or math in your science lesson, because you are. These are necessary for your kids to be able to meet the standard. And then vice versa. If you're really struggling to juggle it all and make it work, what you can say is, oh my goodness, I'm going to reinforce this ELA standard by also working with in my science classroom.
This does happen. It also does take time. So our advice is you can't build Rome in a day. We didn't make that up, but it definitely takes a while to get there. The last thing we're going to show you before we let you briefly explore the evidence statements. These are tremendously helpful and found on the website. These help you build rubrics and know that your assessments are actually assessing what they're supposed to. I'm not going to read you all of this text, but I am going to point out that these headings are super helpful. So if you are assessing this standard, you know that your students are organizing some data, that they have a relationship to identify, and that they need to interpret data. So those can give you items that you work with in your warm-ups, in your exit tickets, in your small groups, and all of the places that you are doing science learning in. So we're going to give you a few minutes to look at the resource page and do a scavenger hunt. You're going to be joining a breakout room that's going to be labeled with a grade level. So you'll be in there with your grade level people. You can choose your own if one of those doesn't apply to you. And then using the presentation that Heather already sent in the chat, you're going to click on your grade level and it's going to take you to a standard. When you look at that performance expectation, you're going to see if you can find the cross-cutting concept, the CCC, the SEP, the science and engineering practice, the DCI, which is the content. Look for that red text, find your assessment boundary, your connections to Common Core should you want to integrate a unit, and your evidence statements. So you'll jump into this resource page using the link on this slide. This is slide 29. You'll jump into your, your grade level choice board, clicking here, and you'll join the breakout room for your grade level, and we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes. So you should now be able to click on breakout rooms at the bottom of your screen. And we'll drop the presentation in the chat one more time. If you don't have it open, you'll need that before you go.
If you work with multiple grade levels, just pick the one that either you're most curious about or something that you're maybe more perplexed about.
Okay, and if you're waiting for the presentation to go to slide 29, that's coming your way now.